Hello and welcome to this second edition of Museums Showoff Online. I'm Rachel Suhami, I'm the producer, and let me introduce you to your host this evening. It's the marvellous and amazing Naomi Paxton.
Hello and welcome to Museums Showoff and this second online show. Thank you for joining us. My name is Naomi Paxton. I'm going to be your host for tonight's show. I'm delighted to be here. To be honest, I haven't really been anywhere else over the past few months. If you're a Museums Showoff regular, then hello and welcome back. If it's your first time, well then welcome. You have a night of museumy goodness ahead of you. Please do share the love on Twitter. You can tag us in and find tags for the presenters at Museums Showoff. And you can use the hashtag Museums Showoff. There's two S's in the middle there. That just helps everybody to make connections, find links and more information, give feedback to presenters, and open up the conversation to more people. Tonight, possibly for the first time in Museums Showoff history, we have a kind of QI Museum Showoff mashup. We have 5 presenters whose first names begin with J. And it's July. Spooky. Let's kick off the show with our first act and our first J and a little bit of storytelling. Please welcome to your screens, Jen Bergavan.
Once upon a time, there was a young girl who was on holiday in Amsterdam. On a whim, she joined a long queue winding around a building on one of the canals. The queue led to the Anne Frank house. Once inside, the girl saw many things and felt many emotions. Some were difficult to feel: anxiety, horror, sadness, anger. But she also felt compassion, empathy, and gratitude. Towards the end of her visit, she felt as though she needed to do something. She needed to change, and she wanted to help the world to change. And so she walked back out of the museum and into the light. Wait, what's that? Oh, you want to know what happened next, if the girl actually did anything? Okay, looks like we're doing this. All right, there are 3 main things we need to talk about when it comes to the impact of museums, and especially of museums who are focused on positive social change. The first is that we fundamentally need to redefine how we think about impact. Visitors' lives are complicated, and when it comes to visitor studies research, there can be a tendency to flatten out those complications and reduce visitors to a series of identifiers based on demographics and/or on their reasons for being in the museum. This can sometimes mean that when we talk about impact, it can come across more like a maths equation: visitor plus museum equals impact and change in a better world, and yay, we can all go home. There's obviously more nuance here, but it's something we really need to consider when we talk about impact and designing museum experiences which challenge systemic inequality. So instead of impact, let's talk about stories of change, which include all of the nuance, complexity, and messiness of what it's like when someone's worldview is challenged and hopefully, maybe, sometimes transformed. The next thing to think about is what role museums play in these stories of change. So when I did my research, the way visitors tended to talk about their museum experiences generally fell into these 5 categories. I'm just going to talk about a few of them. So museums remind us, meaning a reminder of the past, yes, but also as a reminder to be vigilant and engaged in the present. Museums inspire action. So from people having new conversations with colleagues and loved ones, to people seeking more information on their own after their visit through books or TV, to more monumental actions like one person I interviewed who lowered the tuition fees at their nursing school to make their courses more affordable. And finally, museums reaffirm transformative pathways. So for people already involved in activism and social justice work, visits to these kinds of museums recharge their batteries and spur them on to continue this kind of work with renewed vigor. So the last thing to think about are what we can do in museums to help foster the kinds of changes we want to see in the world. Remember, people are complicated and have complicated lives, and they will be along different points of their individual stories of change. Some visitors will just be at the start of that journey, while others will be well on their way. So what kinds of things can we do to create an environment in which change becomes possible for people wherever they are in their own story? So here are 3 key ingredients that came out of the research I did. 1, empathetic and emotional engagement. Most people who felt engaged in this way during their visit said the museum visit had helped them change in some way. 2, focused critical reflection. Providing opportunities to reflect and make sense of the museum visit deepens the experience, making it more long-lasting. And 3, identify platforms for action. Suggest concrete, doable actions or places where people can go to learn more that are closely related to visitors' lives already. This helps change feel more achievable. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please let me know what you think and if you think there are other ingredients museums need to foster positive change in people. If you're interested in knowing more about my research, you can contact me at jennifer.bergevin@le.ac.uk or on Twitter at museum_jen. Hope to see you sometime in a museum near you.
Thank you, Jen. I always loved equations at school. I reckon just off the top of my head, Museum Showoff plus Jen Bergevin plus our audience equals definite yeas. And now, what's that sound you can hear? Is it traffic outside my window? Or is it the sound of us travelling back in time to a cafe to meet our next act, John Cannonberg? I think it's the latter. Make some noise as you travel back through time and welcome John Cannonberg.
Oh, hi! Welcome to the Museum of Portable Sound. I'm the Director and Chief Curator. Have a seat. Thanks for coming to meet me, by the way, in this public cafe. Yes, I know. It's a bit strange to ask you to come meet me here to listen to a museum on my phone. But, as we like to say, it's not an app, it's an experience. Here's a map. Here's our gallery guidebook, which has all the information that you would normally see on the walls in a regular museum. And here's the mobile phone with all the sounds on it. Did you remember to bring headphones? What? No, trust me. We've been doing this for 5 years now. We'll never put this museum online. My name is John Cannonberg. I had an accident and I woke up in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. Am I mad, in a coma, or on my way to Durham to get my eyes checked? Whatever's happened, it's like I've landed on a different planet. Now maybe if I can figure out how Zoom works, I can open my museum again. So I opened the Museum of Portable Sound in 2015, and it's full of sounds that I've recorded myself over the past 2 decades. They're divided up into 30 galleries within 4 main topical areas that are based on typical ways that museums tend to categorize the world. I used to make people visit the museum in person to kind of force them to make an appointment to really listen, which wouldn't happen if the museum were just an app or on a website. After the lockdown began, I had a bit of an existential panic when I realized I'd either have to close my museum indefinitely or come up with a way for people to visit it without compromising my vow to never distribute the museum's sounds as digital files on the internet. And then it hit me. I could play the sounds for my visitors over video chat. In-person visits to the Museum of Portable Sound always worked best when they were a conversation between me and the visitor. So I pared down the museum's 300-page gallery guide into a new online visitor's guide, which contains lists of all the museum's objects. I send it as a PDF to online visitors once they've booked their time slot, and this way they know the entire contents of the museum in advance, so it's a bit more of a two-way street. They ask me for stuff that they'd like to hear, and then I make recommendations based on what they're interested in or how the conversation's going. So far, visits are fairly steady and they're going pretty well. I've had online visitors from Brazil, Finland, Sweden, Canada, and lots of people from the United States. We still have great conversations just like I used to in person, and I'm learning a whole new way to make my museum accessible to new audiences. I also looked around at what people were saying across social media about coping mechanisms for lockdown, and it seemed like free audiobooks were in high demand. So I made an audiobook of the How and Why Wonder Book of Sound, a 1960s children's book about the science behind acoustics and audio recording. It's been downloaded over 40 times so far, and half those people have paid for it. We also just published the Museum of Portable Sound Adult Coloring In book, which uses public domain patent drawings to tell a brief history of portable sound technology. Last month, we opened a new temporary exhibition for the summer, The 5 Most Annoying Sounds in the World, which I've tried to market as an endurance test. The whole show is only 5 minutes, but it's the longest 5 minutes of your life. So if you're interested in it at all, check out our website and maybe even book your own visit. I want to thank Rachel for the opportunity to talk to you today, and I hope you found this inspiring or useful in some way. And feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions. I'd love to talk to you.
That was an awesome 4 minutes. Thank you, John. And now, the time travel continues, not just months, but decades and centuries. Please welcome to your screens, Jane Hoy.
Welcome. Benvenuti. Our story is set in Italy in the 1830s, in Rome, the eternal city on everyone's grand tour. Rome is a hub for artists from all over, and our young Welsh sculptor and draftsman John Gibson can hardly believe he has his own studio near his maestro, Canova. He has sold Mars and Cupid, a 9-foot marble statue, £500, his first commission, sold to the fabulously rich Duke of Devonshire for Chatsworth. John charges far too little, but he wakes in the night and pinches himself. How has the poor boy from Conway and the Liverpool back streets become friends with a bachelor duke? They bond in their admiration of the ancient Greeks, especially the statues of young men, their idealised forms so virile and erotic. Whatever the Greeks did was right, John repeats to himself and anyone else who will listen. I will follow the true style in their work, and if Queen Victoria wants to commission me, she must be in Greek robes, no more gowns, waistcoats and trousers. John glances round his studio. He can see Mary Charlotte Lloyd, his Welsh student, working away at her statue, Horses at Play. Of course women are welcome here. Anyway, he would be lost without Mary and that imp Hattie. They nickname him Gibby and collect him when he gets lost on his travels. At first, John was overwhelmed by Hattie. Hattie Hosmer, American, breeches wearing and very mouthy. But what a sculptor. Her puck is selling very, very well. And her American friend, Edmonia Wildfire Lewis. Her statue of freedom is excellent. He pushes through the crowds of visitors and checks his model's bench. Oh, yes, there he is, that handsome lad from the streets and now immortalised in The Huntsman. And Cupid. Ah, Cupid. Cupid is almost finished. John gazes at the boy's top knot and at the butterfly representing the soul. Cupid and Psyche, his favourite story, the struggles between celestial love and common earthly love. Somehow the Greeks got it right with their androgyny. John sighs, instructs his workmen to get on, and wanders into the heart of the Via della Fontanella towards the Cafe Greco. His dear friend Penry will be waiting for him. What a relief to talk Welsh to charming and gossipy Penry, also risen from poverty. Such a great painter. The tourists love his work, all those romantic peasants in the Campagna. We saw his painting of Rome earlier. Well, grins Penry, what of those Sapphis and Charlotte's Web been up to? I hear our Mary has been galloping across the Campagna with an Irishwoman, Frances Power Cobb. And Hattie is in the Boston marriage. a marriage with Matilda Hayes. Max, she calls herself. John replies, "Oh, I never notice these things." Back in the studio, John seats himself and gazes at Venus. Such tranquility. He can hardly bear to let her go, but tomorrow he and Penry will mix the colours for tinting her. Those chaps at the Royal Academy will hate that. They like their statues white and dead. But whatever the Greeks did was right. Next month, he and Penry will travel to the Alps and England. And so, through the years, the friends share their life and work. Mary, Hattie and Penry are at John's bedside when he dies in 1866 at the age of 75. John gives Penry an emerald ring to remember him by and leaves his fortune to the Royal Academy. Thousands line the streets of Rome at his funeral. I hope you've enjoyed the rags to riches tale of Welshman John Gibson RA, and it will inspire other amazing stories of queer friendships and co-creative relationships in our museums and galleries. And not just in LGBT History Month, but all year round. Grazie. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. And now, please welcome to your screens, Ginny Durrant.
Disposal, a poem. D is for decisions, the tough ones that we make. I is for imagination, creative outcomes we seek. S is for the stuff that we just don't need to keep. P is for the pants that the volunteer donated and put into the storeroom. O is for, oh God, this is really dull. People don't like disposal. I need to make this more exciting, hang on. What if I used a different word? But tonight is a cabaret evening, so I've put on my best waistcoat and my best bowler hat. And instead of presenting to you a poem about disposal, I present Crap Amnesty, a poem. C is for the crud that our predecessor collected. R is for the rubbish bin that we are allowed to use. A is for the angst of making tough decisions. P is for patience as we try and explain things about disposal to the trustees and the friends groups. A is for the amazing staff who want to do the best for their collections. M is for museums. Goes without saying, really. Best place to work in the world, I think. This one in particular. N is for nothing, because you have nothing to worry about. E is for ethics, without which we would be screwed. S is for the stores that are crammed full of brilliant things. But also some real tat. What even is this? T is for the endless teas that we drink as museum folk that keep us going. Always with a biscuit. Y is because museums have too much stuff. And we need to sort it out. Among all the treasures and the wonderful stories, There is a lot of material that perhaps we need to get rid of. However hard it is, whatever other pressures we are under, it's our duty to take action. For our professional selves, for our visitors, and for our funding bodies. Please, let's be more proactive, stop hoarding, and create better, more sustainable collections. Because museums are amazing, just like you. Woo!
Woo indeed! Thank you to the amazing Jenny. And now, who's that in the broom cupboard? It's only our final J of the show. Please make some noise and welcome to Museum Showoff, Joe Dowding.
Oh, it's you. Oh, come closer, come closer. Just doing some knitting in our broom cupboard, like Andy Peters. And this is where we keep our memory box collection. So my name is Jo, and I'm the Access and Learning Manager at Guernsey Museums in the Channel Islands. And memory boxes, what are they? Well, they are boxes filled with objects designed to stimulate memory and get conversation going. And generally these are used by people who have memory difficulties, but actually they're also used by a variety of people who want something to get the conversation going. For example, new groups of people. They're used by individuals as well. So we pretty much have here about 20 memory boxes. Some are on loan at the moment because we offer a free service where people can borrow them like a library. So they just sign out and they bring them back. So I love lists as well as loving broom cupboards, and I've made a list of 5 top things that get conversation started. Are you ready? Cue Top of the Pops music. Number 5, bags. So whenever there's a shop closing down in the lovely town of St Peter Port in Guernsey, we go and get a bag because bags get a lot of conversations going. This is a local music shop. Another bag we have here is Woolworths. Next one is cameras. So now cameras have changed so much over the years, but actually, especially if you're dealing with people who might have memory loss, they're so tactile and you can actually pose for photographs and use the cameras as they were intended. If you can get some disposable cameras as well and actually get the films developed, that's also magic. But being able to press down a button and take a photo is wonderful. Can't figure out how to do this. There we go. And normally you have a nice satisfying click noise, but not on that one. Okay, next one is music formats. A very popular discussion point. Down here we have, E17. Yes, please. We have an LP. Because music formats is one of those things that's changed so much in just living memory. And then, of course, it leads on to discussion about concerts and crushes, that kind of thing. So the next one is cigs and tobacco. Through my experience of doing memory box sessions for about 10 years, there is so much discussion to be had from cigarettes. Because, again, it's one of those massive cultural changes that we've witnessed within just a couple of generations. This is a very, very sizable ashtray here. And this is a lovely thing that you can pass around, maybe as a talking object sometimes as well. The next one on my list is childhood clothing. Now, I'd like you to have a think. What do you think is the most commonly donated object to our memory boxes? Have a little think. The answer is knitting patterns. I don't think there is one person in Guernsey who has ever thrown away a knitting pattern, because most of them have been offered to us very kindly. So this is clearly a photograph of some childhood clothing, but it gets a lot of conversations going. Okay, another list now. Are you ready? This is going to be top 10 tips from my experience of running memory boxes. Number 10, boxes. I don't think you'll ever meet anybody in a museum, especially in museum education, who doesn't get excited about storage. And I don't get paid by the really useful box company, but they are my favourite type of boxes. It's really good to have strong boxes and boxes that are clear, so you can show off all your things. The next one relates to this: weight. Don't put too many books in your boxes because they will get really heavy, and sometimes older people are carrying these boxes who are maybe vulnerable, so health and safety is a factor there. The next one is expectations. Sometimes people want to be entertained, and sometimes people want to receive more of a one-to-one therapy type situation. We've been to bedsides before, we've been to hospitals, care homes, so it's just useful knowing what they expect before you go out there. Have I been going for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Right, I'm just going to sneak this in at the end. Embrace the unknown. It's good to have objects in there that look a bit ambiguous, such as George is holding my mushroom, darling mushroom. That's a really good one. There you go, George. Number 6, stick to stuff, actual objects. I like to stick to tactile things that people can touch and explore and not be worried about breaking. Number 5, stories. Make time in your session to listen to people's stories. They are invaluable, and also from a museum perspective to record some social history there. Avoid the question, what's this? Sometimes if you're dealing with people who have memory problems, that can be a very confrontational question. So instead, take something that arouses curiosity, awakens curiosity. Sorry, I should have warned you about that. That's a very popular one, our football rattle. Purpose, number 3. I like to include some purpose. So sometimes we include some knitting in the boxes that people can have a go at, some old money that people can count, lovely, tactile, useful things. Number 2, senses. This is not smell-o-vision, but this stuff is similar to carbolic soap. Just be aware that if you include anything smelly in your memory box broom cupboard, everything will smell of the smelly thing. Just to be aware. It's good to throw a few set of smells in there. And my last one is, don't be afraid to start small. Just start with something, a few objects, and have a play around with them. And enjoy.
Top tips indeed. Thank you, Jo. Now, I mentioned at our last online museum show-off that I'd had an audition for the Magic Circle, and I said that if it went well, I'd let you know, and if it didn't go well, I would never mention it again. Well, the very fact that I'm talking about it means that it did go well. I am now officially a member of the Magic Circle. Now, you might wonder why I haven't really done magic before at Museum Show-Off, and that's because I don't perform magic as myself. I do it as a character. It's kind of hard to describe. I wonder if... Oh. Maybe the duck can help. Hello? That was unexpected, wasn't it? Don't you think so, Ducky? Back you go. Thank you, Ducky and Ada Camp. Obviously, I haven't been doing any live gigging in person since the lockdown, but I have been doing online stuff, and I cannot wait to get back to the live comedy and cabaret circuits after lockdown, if they still exist. To help make sure that they do, please do check this out. And don't worry, if you do come and see Ada's show, the magic is all real. I don't use plants. Hey! Now, for our next act. How much do you know about Dr. Edward Jenner, what he did, and why what he did is so relevant to the situation we find ourselves in today? Here to tell us more is Owen Gower.
Today, when the Prime Minister opens the UK's Global Vaccine Summit, world leaders will have come together to build on a medical innovation created more than 200 years ago by a Gloucestershire doctor called Edward Jenner. Edward Jenner. Dr. Jenner. Gloucestershire doctor Edward Jenner.
I've got a new fundraising idea.
Every time a politician, a broadcaster, a journalist, a health scientist says the name Edward Jenner, they have to give £1 to support the work of Dr. Jenner's house. This is the house in rural Gloucestershire where country doctor Edward Jenner spent most of his adult life. And since 1985, it's been open as a museum. Until now. Because as Jenner started to be name-checked by politicians, researchers, commentators, we were forced to close by the very thing that gave our story relevance. You may have heard Jenner hailed as an inspiration, a pioneer, a great British scientist. And although something of a niche figure, there is a great deal of mythology around the man. But is it really true? In many ways, the global pandemic has given us an insight into the story of Edward Jenner, a world without vaccination. And through the crowdfunding campaign that we had to run to support our operations whilst closed, we've been able to have a unique form of stakeholder engagement as people around the world told us why they thought Dr. Jenner's house mattered. And in the rare, quiet moments afforded to me by not having to worry about the day-to-day opening of the museum, I've been able to gain a deeper understanding of Edward Jenner through his own words, through his own writings. The Edward Jenner who, as a country doctor, saw firsthand the horrors of smallpox, one of the most horrific diseases of all time. The Edward Jenner who, as a child, was inoculated, deliberately infected with a mild dose of smallpox in order to provide artificial immunity in what was the gold standard medical technique at the time. The Edward Jenner who, as an apprentice surgeon, first heard the country tradition that those who had contracted the mild disease cowpox would never contract smallpox, and who spent much of the rest of his life studying this disease. The Edward Jenner who, on 14th of May 1796, as part of a controlled experiment, deliberately infected young James Phipps with cowpox before attempting to inoculate him, that gold standard medical technique, in order to demonstrate that cowpox did indeed provide protection from smallpox. The Edward Jenner who conducted further clinical trials before writing up his technique and sharing it around the world. The technique soon became known as vaccination, after the Latin vacca for cow. And the Edward Jenner who devoted the rest of his life to patiently explaining the benefits of vaccination, how to perform it safely and effectively, and to providing gentle reassurance for those who are feared or worried about this new technique. But this isn't always the story that we've told. And between you and I don't know that we will ever be able to fully do justice to Jenner in a museum that relies on people coming out of their way to rural Gloucestershire to make ends meet. How do you put that story on a trifold leaflet and persuade people to head up the M5? My personal view is that if we all want to move vaccination forwards, to counter vaccine hesitancy, to challenge the nationalistic health policies that will cost lives, then we must return to the start. We must look to the history contained within the walls of Dr. Jenner's house. We must set our eyes on the Temple of Vaccinia, the rustic thatched hut in the garden where Jenner vaccinated those who needed it most, free of charge, regardless of their ability to pay, as the only way to rid the world from smallpox. No one is safe until we're all safe. So if I had £1 for every time I've heard the name Edward Jenner, even in the last 3 months, then perhaps all of the museum's financial difficulties would be over. But to celebrate Jenner's legacy, it's not enough to just mention his name. Instead, we, both as a museum and as a global community, must commit once again to offering gentle and patient explanation of the benefits of vaccination, to giving a voice to the vaccinated as well as just the vaccinators, to practical action, and to working together in solidarity to save lives.
Absolutely. Thank you, Owen. And now, it's time for our final act of this second online show. From Museums Unlocked, please welcome to your screens, Dan Hicks.
Hello everyone. So I'm going to be talking to you about the Museums Unlocked programme, which I curated over the course of the lockdown for 100 days, from the 1st of April to the 9th of July. And as I talk, you're going to be seeing images of each of the themes that we had for each of the days. But really, I just want to reflect upon, what I've learned from this sort of process, and really, what it means to be a curator in these times. So, I mean, the initial idea for the Museums Unlocked project was that the museums were shut. A lot of the people that work in galleries and the arts and heritage were on furlough, or else were adjusting to the new ways of working, homeschooling, and so forth. And at that time, a lot of the larger institutions were desperately looking for digital content, that often they didn't have, and it was hardly the right moment in which to try to create it. So, rather than having that approach, my interest was really in, well, we all have images, photographs on our devices of the galleries and museums, the historic sites which we have visited and which we love. What would it be like if we shared that knowledge and that passion over the course of a series of days, which turned into 100 days. And the going of the full McGregor, the full 100 days, is, I think, really interesting. It wasn't what I was intending to do at the start, but it has, as the project's moved on, it's really made me think about how your curation is really different, not only under these conditions, but was already changing. So think back to, the project I just referred to, The History of the World in 100 Objects, from now 10 years ago. And that really was, a sort of, reimagining or a continuity of an older model of curation, whereby the curator was the expert and the male, white, London-based, voice was the one that had all the answers to how we understand, the whole of the human past, the whole of sort of culture around the world. And of course, it was a wonderful project, and a lot of people have learned a great deal from it. But here, with the Museums Unlocked, process, we've got a pretty much exactly opposite approach to curation, whereby this isn't crowdsourcing, but community building. This is really about the multivocal, the many voices of those people who really, even on the themes, reimagined what this theme meant, and contributed on each of the themes or the locations, in really unexpected and open-ended ways, which was not just about one institution. It was about our collective love for arts and heritage and culture. So there was a sort of equitable nature there. There was enormous expertise involved in the people who chose to participate, but also your generosity as well. At the same time, the archiving of this means, of course, that we have made something as a group, and there are all sorts of opportunities for how we might think about exhibiting or writing about Museums Unlocked. But fundamentally, as well as that, there's a method here, and I think that method is what I want to to finish on, just underlining. We're going through a time now where we're rethinking, I think, importantly, how we value arts and culture locally. You're moving away from the idea of a single institution or a number of institutions holding culture, and thinking about the importance of art and heritage, where we live. And I think that's somehow linked to, the method that we have really here with the Museums Unlocked approach, whereby there is, it's an attempt to become more democratic, to see our audiences really as co-producers. So this wasn't about engagement, public engagement. This was about making something, together. So I think there's a lot to learn from it. There's a method. Fundamentally, though, I just want to thank everybody, as I did. Maybe one of the most important parts of the project was, was every day I thanked people. I want to thank people one final time for everything that they did, for making the Museums Unlocked program. The hundreds of people that were part of it, and the thousands who enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Well, that's the end of the show. Hasn't it been fab? I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next show is on September the 22nd, so that's a date for your diaries. If you're interested in telling us what you've been up to, then the sign-up sheet will be on the Museum Showoff webpage very soon. Thank you from me and from our producer, Rachel Suhami. And if you're going back to work or just being in the world, stay safe, stay well, stay alert. Baked potato. See you. Bye.